Should I throw in a debate question? Yes. Okay, you ready? So before we talked, I obviously have a very political background, and before we talked, I mentioned Chaos Communication Congress, and I said that it was a lot better than DEF CON because it may not be larger, but it's more political. And you said, no, political? For me, my work here is very political. And I'd be curious, because obviously it's, is it a definition question? Because then there's not much to, like, how you define politics. Or is it, are there other reasons that drew you into working with that, for example? Is it more from a technical perspective, or is it from a social perspective?
Yeah, why I said it is basically because I think a lot of times we only focus on this, that it's so good that peer-to-peer networks are not controlled by politics, and we focus too much on this, I think, on the political part and not on the technological and creation part, like artists and stuff. And that's what I'm more interested in it, and not the political part. But yeah, it's definitely useful for that, but that's not my motivation with it.
What about you as an artist?
I think choosing to use a browser than another, it's a political choice. So I would say that everything is really political choice, really political once we are into technology and we are kind of aware of the choices. But choosing from Safari to Firefox is already super political in my point of view. So of course, when you are doing the effort of finding and installing and opening a browser such as Tor or Beaker, it gets really interesting and political. And I don't know really why I did that in the first place, because you don't know it and you don't exactly understand neither the network because it's the first time. But then it gets interesting to find the edges of this digital object, and then so you can imagine what kind of what kind of possibilities and future are possible. And that's exactly the same with Scuttlebutt, I think, because at first I was like, I don't know what to do with that, but now I can understand that you are connected in this room, so I can see your profile picture on Scuttlebutt as a physically close to me. So that's getting really interesting, and that's kind of small details are making it a tool that doesn't look like other tool, and then I think it's political. But personally, I have a really radical way of using software and tools for a designer or for an artist, I think. But and it costs a lot of time, but I'm okay with that.
Well, I have a personal way to think about artists, even in the realms of the virtual space. As you all know, the gentrification process, artists move in and then the rent rises and everyone moves out. Well, that's where we're at with the internet, I feel. No one really wants to be there anymore. That's my personal take on it. But and now we have this whole new space that we can explore, and we can break boundaries, and we can tweak, and there's so much more potential. There's now establishment for how to do things, or what's okay, or who can host, or how we measure success, and that's quite beautiful, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another question, and I think you started talking about it a bit, Hunor. It's about security. I think it's particularly interesting. I think there was a discussion last year or early this year where some people discussed the idea of hosting a copy of Wikipedia on that. And the discussion was, and I think it was Paul who made a post about it, I don't remember. But basically the discussion was, okay, yeah, it's very interesting to decentralize Wikipedia. But there's a weak spot, in a way, in Beaker, is that you can see, it's like when you download with BitTorrent, you can see your peers. You can see who are the other people who are sharing files and who are accessing it in some way. And so when you start thinking about censorship, for example, because you can think, yeah, that's great, we can decentralize Wikipedia so nobody can censor it. And so we can share sensible content with these technologies, but there's this sensible point, but then you can see who's sharing this information and that can backfire to them. Is there anything you can say or add about that?
One solution is to use VPN, because then your IP is hidden, but there's not really you can do with that. That's why it's peer-to-peer.
So it gets us back to this idea of a network of trust, basically.
Yep, yeah. And also when we discussed, I think we also discussed this on Roton.
That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, and there was this discussion that it gets a bit more human Wikipedia, because you can decide that there's an article, there are the same two articles about the same topic, and you can decide if you trust this friend or that friend in that. So it's a bit more human. So again, decide if you get an information from someone or from someone else.
And has there been any similar discussions in Scuttlebutt? I came to Scuttlebutt a bit later, so I might have missed some of the early...
Well, I gotta say, I came pretty late too.
But before me.
Yeah. Scuttlebutt doesn't have the same privacy issue, not that specific one. That there was a workshop at Radical Networks about this as well. And maybe talking about if we should have warnings embedded in the UX of Beaker Browser, for example. Because currently, if someone starts using Beaker Browser in China, it's super easy to see exactly all the web pages they've been on and to track their behavior. I'm really curious if there's an actual technical solution to this. Like, no?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, shout out web. Get on that. In general, there are definitely issues. I don't want to name them publicly. I'd be happy to talk about them now, because I don't want to put ideas into heads of people who might use them for that reason. So I'm holding off on that a little bit until maybe we can solve it. But another interesting one that we have had that's more of a solution that doesn't exist yet is the idea of liquid democracy. How many know of liquid democracy? A few. That's cool. That's cool. Well, liquid democracy is a means of democracy that is made possible by technology. And what we can do now is basically, if I say, you know a lot about how IP visibility functions in DAT and Beaker, for example, let's say, well, you know more than me, and we're going to vote on that topic, then I delegate my vote to you. And then that's how the whole voting network works. So it becomes direct democracy without everyone having to vote on every single issue. And that's something that we're exploring right now, which I think is very, very fascinating, because it could transform how we think of ownership and how we think of voting rights, and make it very, very fluid to vote on everything, everyone, if we want to. Yeah.
Just to note, I'm not sure if you can really see which sites does someone from China visit, but only that he uses, or that. It's like in torrent is the same. If they don't know what you exactly torrent, but they can see that you use torrent. So I'm not sure.
If you check the websites, you can see who's been on.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can see the peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Those
can
things.
see.
So
Yeah,
so
that
know
way.
who's
Yeah.
sharing when you're also sharing a particle page, you can see the peers. Yes. Which is the same with BitTorrent. If you're seeding a film or downloading a film, you can see from which IPs you're downloading, which is the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a big issue in all these in peer-to-peer technologies in general. Yeah.
If it's an issue, if you look at it as an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. But you have at least, I guess, to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Because that's something I've seen several times when people discover these technologies. They're like, that's great, I can do that. And at some point you want to be like, wait a minute. There are some things that become sensible. I think there was the same, at some point somebody shared like a list of employees of ICE in the United States, the administration that deals with immigration. And there was the same issue actually. So basically that list was leaked, and some people started sharing it on that, and there was the same discussion like, okay, you can, but if you do that, people can figure out, like authorities in the US can figure out who is sharing this list, which was like illegal because it's private information. So yeah, it's a question that comes back, and there's, I think, a bit of a naive reaction when people think, great, it's decentralized, so we kind of there's no more limit, and yeah, there's still some risks. And also maybe related to that. Yeah, but okay, if it's... Is it... Yeah, later. I just do one and then it's free to you. Yeah. We'll come to that. No, but just one last topic I want to bring, and then it's all up to you. It's I don't know how to bring it exactly. We have a lot of people who are, for example, fleeing off Twitter because of the moderation on Twitter is terrible. Like, they're very keen to ban people who are raging against Nazis, but they don't ban the Nazis. And that's another trouble we're dealing with, so also moderation on Facebook, etc. What do we do? I mean, for now, I think we're pretty lucky that the communities on that Beaker and on Scuttlebutt have been behaving pretty well, I think. But what will we do when eventually, at some point, maybe, like the alt-right or trolls or whatever, get on this place? Okay, it happened. So you have something to tell about that.
Well, there was, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Andres Stoltz who posted something on Twitter, and it was like hashtag free speech. And apparently that's a hashtag that a lot of people of the alt-right follow. So Scuttlebutt got a huge wave of alt-righters who joined Scuttlebutt. It faded away pretty quickly because everyone just ended up blocking them. So that's our solution.
Great, yeah. So it doesn't, I mean, there's always, is there a risk actually of ruining the community or like ruining the tool in some way? That
I don't think, I think the bigger risk is more, okay. So the community, I think, is okay because the community can control itself.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? Yeah, something like that. Self-regulate. Thank you, mister. So the community can self-regulate itself, but the network as a whole, obviously, if an alt-right group joins that network, they can have their own network, and no one would even know that. So, I mean, yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, from the way you have some islands that are disconnected from the rest, basically. Yeah.
And is there danger in that?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, some people could argue that the protocol is enabling them to discuss, and I mean, there's been this whole debate of deplatforming them. But yeah, if they're living in isolation anyway, but maybe, yeah.
Like, one thing is, I mean, that's free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Like having the ability to actually talk about things. But I think, in a sense, the censoring of those communities can also spur the whole, spur the movement on more. Because then it's like, what? I'm not allowed to talk about this? Well, you can't stop me. That kind of thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
And for that, I don't think that's a problem, because you don't have a search engine where you misclick something and you go to a bad site. Something you have to choose your sources and on which URLs you go. So I think even if a lot of bad people would join, you can just ignore them, because you really have to click on the link or something, not like in a search engine that it just drops out. And for Twitter, I got blocked because they realized that I was younger than 13 when I joined. They realize this now and they blocked me. So yeah, and the only thing I had to do is press a button that I'm now older than 13. So they can't realize that. Thanks, Twitter.
No, it's not really helping, but I'm just remembering the first time I opened Freenet, the Freenet project, which comes with a browser, I think, as well. And so Freenet has a really bad reputation because of hosting child pornography and many other illegal stuff. Now the reputation is bad, even more bad for all those marketplace, and so journalists has something else to talk about. Freenet still exists. So I think that you have the technology, what it allows, and you have also some people who goes just to publish poetry on Freenet that are in a way more beautiful than other poetry. And so when you realize that that kind of content exists, it's like a flower in the middle of lava or something like that. And I find it kind of beautiful.
I was wondering how it works, that protocol or other protocols, with a new kind of user of the networks that are people with handhelds. You know, it seems that there is like an aristocracy of networks that is led by people with computers, actual computers. You know, the big computers at home or the laptops that can share and store. And there's a lot of new devices that cannot store much, and they are plugged and unplugged from the network for short times. And so isn't a new kind of hierarchy between users that is led by who can store, who is constantly offline. You talk about a Raspberry that is constantly online, so it's a kind of server. So isn't it not a danger? Because we can see now that a lot of people are reduced to the role of consumers because they just have a small device that is made just to consume, not to produce. And it's an issue for the new kind of internet we are going to. Is there something you are working on about this?
I mean, just have something to add is that this is mainly the problem of the web. So the web was not what it is today. Web was not hosted in the same way it is hosted today. So it was more or less closer than what we show with that protocol. And then it's also the problem of cryptocurrency in general. So the way we are using Bitcoin today is not Bitcoin, for example, is not. We can't be miners anymore because of the size of the blockchain. So I totally agree. Now I think that a part of the solution can be at a design part. I mean, an interface based on related to the interface, saying, okay, this is a content, and you can be part of the content. And for bigger browser, you have this small, how does it call, the choice for a slider, yeah, to choose how long do you want to seed a file, so download it in a way. So you have 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and forever. So forever, just download it forever on your machine. And 1 day is just I want keep it one day, for example, for this event, for example. So maybe that's the beginning of the responsibility we can have with data, and just saying that we can do that is more interesting than just ignoring the fact that we can host B server again, I think.
Also, I know for Scuttlebutt, the biggest ever data storage, like of a log and their blobs, that I've ever seen has been one of the 4 first users, which is Cell. He had a storage of about 3 gigabytes, and his computer is barely a computer. It's like electronics connected to a screen, Raspberry Pi. So you don't really need that much storage to actually be able to use it. And I know for DOT, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the data is always replicated 3 times. So if something goes offline, which was their initial host, if it goes offline again, or if it goes offline after first hosting it, the data is still there and will be replicated once again. So there's always 3 different nodes that have access to the data. And then the node, when it comes online again, can still access it. So yeah, storage issues is actually the reverse. So a lot of people have been talking about how in regions with low connectivity, these kind of protocols are excellent, since they don't need to have a good infrastructure already, because they don't always have to be online. If they go offline and if there's no connectivity, they still have access to the data, and it doesn't require that much storage or processing power in Bitcoin's case. Yeah.
So can we actually, with that, for example, can we host things that we didn't visit? Because if it's replicated 3 times, how does the browser choose where to put data? Or are there some servers somewhere that act as proxies for like people with low connectivity? Or, well, I don't know if you know about this.
I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that at least 3 servers or 3 storage devices have to have the data in order to make sure that it's online. Do you know what I mean now? Yeah.
So you probably mean that you need 3 computers sitting aside in order to be able to shut down and keep them synchronized. Yeah. So, and he's asking if yeah, but it still exists. So even if it has 1 peer, it exists, and you can still visit it. But it doesn't choose. You choose if you want to see it or not. So it didn't get like seeded automatically. No. or maybe we talk about different things totally, but no, it's good. But you never seed something you don't want to seed. So if you visit a site, it first gets cached on your computer, and if you choose to seed, then it will be saved online and keep synchronized. So you don't seed what you don't want to.
And right now there is not a lot of, I will say rules, but law about internet. They will come day by day with Article 13, of course, for example, but we need to speak, to talk to people who make politics about it. Here we are a lot of artists, I think, and I think it's bad. Yeah, that's it. And what do you think about it?
What's bad?
All of us are artists and not politic or in French, des gérants politiques. And that's a problem, no? Some law will come and maybe will stop peer-to-peer or some...
They can't stop peer-to-peer. That's the whole point of it. We don't want them to be able to stop it. And like inherently, it should be unstoppable. Because if the politicians start stopping things that are really good, why should we listen to the politicians?
With time, we need to become politicians.
What was that?
We need us become politicians with time.
There's many different ways to do things. Indeed, you can work within the system and you can become a politician and change society from within the already pre-established system. Or you can work on building new systems or alternatives to the pre-existing system, such as liquid democracy or whatever other form you want. But to answer whether politicians are becoming aware, for sure they are, because we are actively pushing out and applying for money from a lot of different research funds, and a lot of these research funds, they work as channeling sources for the politicians to learn about whatever's out there already. So yeah, the news is spreading. Samsung is now an expert on, not an expert, but Samsung is now really good on decentralized protocols, for example. Yeah, those kind of things. Because of that, the research grants, they learn a lot.
I was wondering, but for me, the best world of internet would be, as we saw the image of centralized, decentralized, and distributed, would be a complete mix of decentralized and distributed. That would be my idea of the perfect world. I don't know if you would like to be everything to be distributed. I don't know how, because we only talked about peers, like individuals, and there's also groups working together. So like you made a collaboration with another artist, would you have just 2 copies on your both machines, or is there some space you share, or what should Greenpeace do as a, not an individual, but as a NGO, or how would you prefer them to work in this peer-to-peer world?
I think the perfect would be a mix of decentralized and distributed, because sometimes you need a centralized, trusted peer. It's still a peer. So even if you see the site from a Raspberry Pi, which might be the same as hosting as a server, it's not just a server, because you can choose to see the file. You can choose to ignore that peer. And on a server client model, you can't choose to ignore the server. So it gives you a possibility to choose. And why I think we need some centralized points is, for example, a web store. You want an online shop, and you can do that pretty amazingly on the peer-to-peer web, because you share all the content in a data archive, and anyone can basically browse the site when they want. So they don't depend on the server. Even if they offline, they can store and put things into the cart. And only the moment when you want to pay, when you want to check out, you need decentralized server. So this way is a good mixture of peer-to-peer and centralized services. And yeah.
I didn't quite understand how Dark Crystal works. Could you re-explain it, please? Like with the example you gave with the secret.
So in Harry Potter, Voldemort has split up his soul into several different pieces. It's because his soul is very important and he wants it to not disappear. So he wants to continuously always live. And take that. So you take a secret and then you split it up into something you can trust. I don't remember, it was like a ring or like a medallion in Voldemort's case. In our case, it's friends. So you take the very secret thing, and I give you a piece of my secret, I give you a piece of my secret, and I give you a piece of my secret, let's say. And then when I lose my secret, in Voldemort's case, when he dies, in this case, when I lose my computer, because it would probably be my private key, then I ask my friends for the secret back. So you only have a piece of it, so you can't like steal my identity or take over my secret. But you could give me that piece back, and you can give me that piece back, and you can give me that piece back, which means that by the end of it, I have my secret. even though I already lost it.
Oh, okay. So if one decide not to give you a piece, you won't.
It's gone. But you can give multiple pieces.
But would you be able to access like half of it? Like, let's say he doesn't want to give you a piece of it, like, but the other ones do. Do you still get like a little bit of access to?
No, you don't get a little bit of access to it.
So no access at all.
No access at all.
Okay.
But for example, you can give multiple copies of the same pieces to different people. So let's say I give you a piece, and then I give you the same piece. That means that if he refuses to give me that piece, I can still get it from another source.
I have a question about this concept of the decentralized web and the distributed web. So Mastodon, for example, in this would be decentralized, right? And Scuttlebutt would be distributed. Is it something that we can say? Because I understand Mastodon, there are servers that you use. I use, for example, one server that is here in Brussels. And then in Scuttlebutt, I would host my data myself in my own computer. So that would be totally distributed. Is that correct?
So yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But I think there's a big difference between these decentralized and distributed ones, and that's the reason why I skipped it, is that most decentralized services just still use the HTTP protocol. So even they're decentralized, but on a smaller scale, they're still centralized. And even if you remove all the centralized points, the network disappears. And then a distributed one, basically, the network only disappears if you remove every peer. So
just a question about devices, and so you only use your account. I don't know if you can say your account or your identity on one device. So is that how you do it? How do you do it? You only access this service through one device.
On Scuttlebutt, for example, you have another identity for your mobile one, for example, or for multiple devices, you need more identities, multiple ones.
So you need to go through the same process on different devices to have the same network?
Currently, yes, but they're also working with DHT. Is that what it's called? No, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a way to make it so that this ID equals the other ID, which means that whenever information comes to one ID, it can be spread to the other ID. But that's using like a separate protocol-ish to route the information. That's still being built right now, so it's not in existence currently. But yeah, it'll get there eventually.
And also in that, after they finish working on the multi-writer thing, because that's what they're working on for a lot of time actually, to be able to write, to be the owner of a site from another computer. Basically after that you can do the same. And also they're working on making an API to share your Beaker browser information between other Beaker browsers, so seed the same sites and save the same sites. And this too, I think it enables you to do whatever you want, wherever you want it. But for synchronizing on the peer-to-peer web, you have to keep in mind that you need 3 peers. So if you have 2 computers, you need another computer that's turned on when one of the other computers is turned off. So for example, yeah. So if I want to share some files between my home computer and my office computer, I need a 3rd computer, because mostly when I'm in the office, my home computer is turned off and vice versa.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you more specific question about the mainstreaming process of these distributed solutions. I would refer to the cryptography technology, and my question goes about the automatization of all these topics. So what would be your position on pushing forwards a very automatic, very frictionless, very easy solution, and on the other hand, having something trustworthy, transparent, when you can decide what you host or not? both hands have advantages and disadvantages, but I'd like to hear your thought about this question of automatization or not. Thank you. Now, just to explain, in cryptography, for the emails, you had traditionally PGP. Yeah. But it needs you to be a little geek. You need to be able to understand what's a private or public key. And now came, not so long time ago, Pretty Easy Privacy, which automates everything on this. You don't need to understand anything on what's happening. And it's supposed to be a weapon of mass encryption. But it goes with bad effects.
We've been having this discussion. So there's many different viewpoints within at least Scuttlebutt. I don't know that as well, but in Scuttlebutt that's a debate or a conversation at least. As for multiple reasons. As you mentioned, like there's the whole safety aspect of it and how much people understand, kind of what we talked about previously. Do people understand that their IP is visible when they go to sites? Those kind of things. There are, since these are new protocols, they have new functions. How much should we allow people to understand, and to what point should we develop, or do we have a responsibility to develop the platforms before they go mainstream? So some people want them to go mainstream fast, because what we currently have is horrendous, with like super invasive data situation. As you all probably know, with the customized advertisements, etc. And then that's one side of it. And then you also have the issue of currently, for example, Scuttlebutt could be very easily hijacked. And me and Rabel, one of the guys who's been building Twitter, we had a discussion specifically in regards to cryptocurrencies, and he also wants to implement top-down censoring. Because what you can do is you can implement cryptocurrencies over these protocols, which would make it so that if you're using Beaker, for example, for every click you make, that could cost money. It's totally possible to implement that over these protocols since they're blockchain based, which means you could, on Scuttlebutt, your ID is tied to the user or to the person, and for everything you do could cost money and could cost different things, etc. Which I find absurd, but currently at the state of how it is, it's not that difficult to actually just hijack the protocol and implement a cryptocurrency over it, which is dangerous. So they're also super profitable. Shout out all you people who want to make money. So I think we also have a responsibility to ensure that we safeguard the protocols themselves. We have the responsibility in one, to safeguard the people, and the responsibility in two, to safeguard the protocols, to ensure that it stays free for the public. Very important one. But then again, we also have a responsibility to save the people from the invasive data policies that every single website pretty much today has. Yeah.
I don't really understand why someone would fork Scuttlebutt in order to make money out of it, given the fact that you still can use the non-paying system. Why?
Currently. Like, for example, since Scuttlebutt is way more suitable for use in like Africa, for example, or regions where there's no good infrastructures, you could hypothetically implement like a protocol that works way better there and charge everyone for using it always. So it would make it like, no free internet. And eventually, this is growing. If it grows enough, suddenly, instead of having a free internet that's peer-to-peer, you have a internet that costs that's peer-to-peer.
By the way, what's the license of Scuttlebutt? Yeah, but what kind? Yeah. Because it gets related to that at some point. What is it possible and not? But that's okay. I see you online. Okay.
So the reason why I came here is because I think what you were to present was the third leg of something I quite longing for, meaning we have already the capacity to self-host, which is a pretty good point, and yeah, we already have the ability to self-host ourselves, which is already a good point. We have ways to secure our data, like VPN became much more available to people. And the third leg is how do we how do we generate our own web? And I wanted to know if what you had in mind or what you're proposing is something that can address that, because we need the juice to circulate things. So is this something that you're thinking on? Is the system that you presented going into this direction, like generating your own signal, so then to be used in a peer-to-peer way? And going back to what my neighbor said previously, I think the security is really important. If we are to start to use a new system to become a standard, to push for becoming a standard, we have to make sure that everything is secure end to end. So encryption or otherwise, the system should be really thought in a way that our data are safe, so that we don't experience the same thing with the GAFAM again. And I wanted to ask another question, potential issue that I see, because peer-to-peer only works if we have a lot of peers, because the bandwidth and the transfer of data depends on how many people are connected, how many people are sharing the same thing. So I was wondering also if you had a solution to address this problem.
I think websites usually are not so big that you need a lot of peers in order to get it. So even if I share something from my computer, you can pretty normally access it. It's not so slow.
For example, cloud. If you have a cloud and you have like, I don't know, 200, 300 people connected and synchronizing their stuff with their cloud. Just an example.
Yes. I don't understand. No, I don't understand the question, sorry.
So yeah, a regular website has more or less traffic, so that's this is not what I had in mind.
Yep.
But you have some application like a cloud, like if you're hosting your own mail server, for example. This requires a lot of bandwidth and a lot of connection. So in that case, the number of connected peer, I'm asking if it's really important.
Yeah, but I think that's what you missed in the presentation, is that basically more users doesn't mean more bandwidth. So because it's peer-to-peer, if you have more users, they help you seed the site. So they help you make the site accessible for more people. And for the cloud, it doesn't exist in a peer-to-peer world, basically, because you don't give out your data to anyone. You use your own computer for all the data you store. So it's actually very, very good for bandwidth control and decreasing the bandwidth, because yeah, you're self-hosting and other people are helping you in that. And for bigger applications, those kind of applications don't exist in the peer-to-peer web, where you put a lot of things to it. Basically, tools exist that help you manipulate, transform the data, and then maybe visualize it somehow. So yeah, there's no server side. There's only a client-side code, which has access. You can give it access to write to your file system or not. And what was the first question? and going mainstream, something.
It's about security,
Okay.
but there is end-to-end encryption already.
Yes, that is super encrypted. So if you would self-host on HTTP and you really don't want to depend on any authority, so you would give your friends the IP address, then that wouldn't be secure because you don't have SSL, but that is encrypted end-to-end, so that's not an issue.
In Scuttlebutt's case, it's only encrypted, like completely, when it's private messages. But you can always choose to send private messages to groups up to 7 people. And otherwise, it's encrypted to the people you are sharing it with. Like, no one can see the data unless they're within the realm. That's also something we talked about previously, but yeah. Yeah, pretty safe.
I think a more global answer would be those tool comes with new way of using as well. It's not something replacing habits that we already have.